What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We get into politics, business, culture, news. If it impacts you as a Fort Worthian, we discuss it. We give you one big story, 3 short stories, wins, losses, and actions. Today, the big story is with Allison Campolo, who's running for Tarrant Democratic Chair. Allison, how goes it?
It's going really great. Thank you so much for having me today.
I know. How's it feel to be in person at the 817 podcast?
Oh, it is like a bit surreal. So I'm sure like everybody listening or watching out there, you know, I've been on my little Spotify listening to y'all. I'm like, oh, I know those people. It's so cool. And now I'm here. Like, it's just really wild. It's so cool. It is a very cool space, y'all. This is really, you feel very good when you get here.
Yes. And so we have Ann Zeta, our lovely co-host, and our producer, Wesley Kirk. So before we dive in and start working on kind of just figuring out what's the vision for the Tarrant Democratic Party that Allison has for us, I want to just kind of go back and kind of share a little bit about Allison. Allison ran for Senate in 2017 and 2018. She was party chair in 21 through 2023, and she's also led the cycle 3 times for our county when just getting us out to vote and try to help turn our county blue. And sometimes we were successful, and sometimes we had challenges. So I would love to know, what is your Fort Worth story?
Oh, my Fort Worth story. So I try to keep this on the down low, but I guess it's going to be out there now. I grew up in Dallas County. I'm really sorry, everybody. So I grew up in Irving, and my story begins, you know, my political story and my Fort Worth story began obviously in Dallas County and in Irving. So my the judges who helped flip Dallas County in 2004, 2006. So Dallas used to be red. So when I growing up there, it was still red county, and my dad was part of the cohort that participated and led this huge coordinated campaign from the bottom of the ballot. So all of these judges, like as we know here in Tarrant County, if you've ever tried to flip a judicial seat, it's freaking hard. It is almost impossible. And so they got together and they said, if we run as a coalition, as a whole group together in a coordinated fashion, we can flip this county. Wow. So they all started running in 2002 and everybody lost. Cool, no problem. They ran again in 2004, and a couple made it over the line. So Lupe Valdez, who was a sheriff and that ran for governor, a couple people got over the line in 2004, and then they all were like, okay, let's just do this one more time. 3rd time's a charm. We can sense the tide's going to turn, and they all ran again as a coordinated effort, and every single one of them won in 2006, which was really going to that inauguration on January 1st, 2007 was stunning. I mean, it was just crazy to see all these Democrats getting, signed into office on January 1st. It was so cool. So anyway, so that was my whole political upbringing. And then I moved here with my husband to Tarrant County. I actually live in Euless, so I'm Fort Worth adjacent. I really like Fort Worth. You guys are super cool. I'm so sorry I can't vote on anything in Fort Worth. But I respect that it's obviously one of the largest counties or largest cities in our nation. Obviously one of the largest cities in our state is so critical. And so, you know, my husband and I live in Euless. We both work in Fort Worth. We work like 2 minutes away from each other. And so my Fort Worth story is that, you know, I didn't grow up here, but I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah. Man,
I think the only one in this room that grew up here is our producer.
Oh, well done. All right.
The rest of us are from other places, and keeping things on the down low is, I mean, I came from California.
Oh, no.
35 years ago.
Good gracious.
And what's awesome, it's almost like in a way, you're, father's footsteps in a sense of now, but you're doing it in Tarrant County. Mm-hmm. What do you see for Tarrant County in a sense of, like, it seems like we're living through that time for us. Mm-hmm. And so what's brought you back into the arena, and what do you see for the county?
Thank you. Yeah, good question. So, like as you said, I've been involved in politics here in Tarrant County side basically since I got here. So 2017, I started running, and SD10 at that time was a countywide district, before they redistricted it horribly to get Beverly out. So I've been kind of engaged in countywide politics since I started in politics in Tarrant County. And then, of course, in 2023, I kind of took a step back, and then I from party chair, and I started really focusing on like local elections and kind of just focus on things that were like really in my neighborhood for a couple cycles or a couple years. And then I started getting much more involved back into the beat on countywide stuff when the redistricting happened at the county commissioner's court. And of course, it doesn't matter what precinct you're in, that affects everybody in Tarrant County. And our county judge obviously affects everybody in Tarrant County. And so I got really involved in that and was really trying to help lead the effort. I know, EJ, you were a big part of that. Of course, Alex Montalvo as well. And a lot of other folks are organizing around that county commissioner's vote. And then it just so happened the timing of things. Crystal announced her resignation from party chair on June 1st. The commissioner's vote was on June 3rd. And despite the fact that the vote went exactly how we thought it was going to, we knew what the count was. It was still a really brutal day. It was a really brutal day. And just the way that the judge treats our commissioner and treats everybody around him and really treats everybody less than him. He threatened several times to clear the court for people just existing. I mean,
It's
it was
terrifying
horrible.
to be in there. It's so uncomfortable.
It's so uncomfortable. And you know he's violating your First Amendment rights, but until we bring it to court, we can't do anything about it. Anyway, so I got home from that vote feeling just like totally overwhelmed with the day. And I realized like, yeah, you know what? I've been organizing around this for a couple months, like, and if Crystal's stepping down, like I'm super ready to step up. And so I announced I was running again. So here we are. You know, I just got my guiding light here is not only to flip Tarrant County and get Democrats to the ballot box, and it's not only to make sure that folks have access to the ballot box, even while Tim O'Hare and everyone like Tim O'Hare is trying to take it away. But my also guiding light on this is specifically, I'm just going to admit this to you guys, is to unelect Tim O'Hare. So and if we can do that, that means every other Democrat in Tarrant County who's running countywide, who's running in any of our flippable districts, will get elected, and I think that's really important.
Yeah. I would like to know, like, how does, with your lens and your experience, like, what would you want people who think of politics from the state level to know, or like, what do we need to see there to help assist in what you're doing at the county level? And then obviously Fort Worth is 46% of the county, so we think a lot from the city level. Being kind of the middle person between state and city, what would you like both sides to know about what you need?
I need everyone to know that there's plenty of Democrats here in Tarrant County. We just need to get them out to vote. So everybody has said that this county is a red county forever, and it's made it a self-fulfilling prophecy. You say, oh, it's a red county, and then every Democrat in Tarrant thinks I'm the only one here, there's no point in me voting, and it really drives up voter apathy. It also drives up a chronic underinvestment in democratic infrastructure in our county for decades. And so, having been chair, or having, I ran Tarrant Together, which was a countywide voter registration and engagement initiative, and I ran for state senate. Having done those things, it is so clear. I'm sorry, I keep touching things. It is so clear that the whole state and the country and a lot of local residents here, they all believe there's no point in investing in Democrats in Tarrant County, and if we keep not investing, we're going to keep not winning. And so if just recently in the 2024 cycle and a little bit in the 2022 cycle, we started coming up on those lists. Tarrant County is the one to watch. Tarrant County is the one to invest in. Tarrant County is a bellwether of Texas, and it is, and we should be invested in. And the more that we can invest, and I don't mean just financially, but also with effort and collaboration and coordination between the state and the county. If we can invest in this county, we can flip it. There's plenty of people here. We don't have to convince any Republicans to vote for us. We just have to get the Democrats here out to the ballot box. It's that easy.
Yeah. We hear that. We see that with Fort Worth too, where if you walk up to 10 Fort Worthians, random ones, and says, is this city a Republican city or a Democrat city? They would say it's a Republican city, even though we're sitting right now.
Even though not.
Yeah, we're sitting with 6 city council members.
Yes.
I constantly have to remind people that Tarrant County is the largest swing county in the country.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Full circle back to getting people out to vote. I think a lot of the city people who are organizing, we see the city play being a big part, with Arlington and Fort Worth being majority of the county, just in those two areas. How do we get the bigger cities to see that matters, because they also think they are Republican cities?
Right. I think, and that's not an easy question to answer. As you guys who've been so engaged in local politics, it's not an easy question to answer. But, I think one of the things that I'm seeing turn the tide is the public pressure. And this doesn't always help. It doesn't always work. But man, the way, like 817 and so many other, Tarrant for Change and so many other groups that organize locally have been applying this pressure, especially since, this year started. I have been so impressed, and it matters. We're seeing votes go the way we want them to, or at least delaying the vote, something. We're getting something out of it. And I think the more we can keep applying that pressure, we need residents to know they're not the only ones, and we need those residents to show up to speak to their city councils and to lobby their representatives, even at the local levels, to do the right thing and to represent them well. If residents keep not showing up to speak to their representatives, then representatives will just do whatever they want or whatever the lobbyists paid them to do. But the more we apply this pressure, the more we'll get out of our representatives and the people we elected. And I think, groups like 817 and everyone else that's organizing locally is doing an amazing job of putting on that pressure. We need to keep doing that.
I think when we gather together and we see that there are more of us out there, that's really heartwarming, and it makes people who think that they're alone, is to your point. Because I remember back in 2014 being at a big event on Magnolia, And there were people running around trying to get people registered to vote. And I was standing talking to a couple of women that were doing that. And somebody walked by and they asked them, are you registered to vote? And he's like, oh, no, I don't do that. And that has stuck with me so long.
11 years later, you remember that conversation?
Oh, my gosh. There's a photograph of me standing and talking to these two women with my child next to me. So I just think of that response every time I have conversations about voting. Because to me, someone who was raised by parents who impressed upon me the importance of voting, and someone who took my kids to the polls with me when I voted, I have a hard time understanding people who don't vote, but there is a lot of pressure and things that happen that get in the way of people voting. Even if we have days and days and days of early voting, we still seem to be fighting these battles.
Absolutely.
And you have been in this position before. So what do you think is going to be different about how you run things this go round from last go round?
That is a great question. So, one of the things I immediately thought of when I said, okay, I want to try to do this again, was what can I build on from last time, and what lessons can we learn from last time? And so some of the things, because my experience prior to last time was being a candidate or being in charge of a coordinated campaign or running my own organization, you get a very top-down view and feel of doing those actions. And I knew this going into being county chair the last time, but you don't know it until you're in it, right? Which is, the county party is not a top-down organization, obviously. It is made up of the CEC, the precinct chairs, the county executive committee. So the county chair is not really in charge of anything. The county chair is the face, and the county chair should be one of the key fundraisers. It should give you big picture decisions, but really it's made up of the precinct chairs. And so I want to further invest this time in the precinct chairs and the volunteers and the organic nature of the party and what it can be and should be from that perspective. So, last time I was really focused on hiring a field director, and I did, and setting specific goals field wise, like you would if you led your own organization. But I think this time I want to take a slightly different approach and apply all that effort or funding or support directly to our precinct chairs. Give them the training, give them the organization they need, the materials they need to make this happen a little bit more organically and from the volunteer level. And I think that'll really not only let us grow the county and our respective voters more organically and in their communities. But the more our precinct chairs and volunteers get out there, the more volunteers and precinct chairs we get. The more people want to sign up with the party. And I think that's my, in a shortish statement, that's like my biggest focused change this time between last time. It's much less of Allison dictating something and more, let's just invest in these people that already want to do this and already know their communities and let them drive that engine.
Yeah. And there's current, it seems like the precinct chair, there's gaps in the county that we need to fill.
Sure.
And
yes.
Can you kind of give what you look for, people who might be listening to this pod, what makes an ideal precinct chair and what's kind of the commitment looks like?
Yes, great question. So if you don't know what a precinct chair does, if you've never been one or talked to one, it's somebody that organizes their community, so their precinct. So the county is divided up into voting precincts, and there's about 600 populated precincts in the county that need somebody to organize them. So right now the party has a little bit under 240 precinct chairs, and so that means we have a lot of precincts to fill with precinct chairs. So a precinct chair is really responsible for making sure the voters in their area are getting out to vote. They know when an election is. They know who's on the ballot. They know how to vote. They know everything they need to know, getting to what's important about these positions of these people running. So they're educating their communities and helping them get to the ballot. And that is an easy thing to say, and it's a much harder thing to do functionally. It depends on how big your precinct is and how comfortable you are with your community. Anybody can be a precinct chair. Anybody of any experience. You don't need to be, particularly politically active prior to now. Anybody can do this. You just need to be willing to talk to your neighbors, whether it be a door knock or a phone call or passing out flyers or showing up at the polls. You just have to be willing to talk to your neighbors and engage them on that one-to-one level so that they know somebody from their community is telling them, hey, an election is coming up. This is really important. You need to get out to vote.
Yeah, my precinct has always had a really active chair, and they've had a presence on social media. They've been active in the neighborhood, and then he retired this last go round.
Oh dear.
And then, but somebody very young and energetic has stepped into that role. So
yeah,
I'll help you find some other people.
That's great.
I'm precinct chair for my neighborhood.
What?
And I had such a long conversation of someone explaining to me what a precinct chair is, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. But the thing that clicked in my head is it's just being a good neighbor. It's being the point person in your neighborhood for when there's an election. You're the one helping get out information, and everyone in your neighborhood knows they can come to you being like, what's going on? What should I, who should I vote for? What are the dates? Just that kind of basic information.
I think we should get it to be competitive. find out how many voters you have in your precinct, and then like compete with other precinct
Percentage-wise,
chairs,
like-
like the percentage of people that you got out to vote.
I love that idea. I
Gamify it.
I'm all about gamifying things. Yes, definitely.
What is does the Republicans have a gap as well?
They do.
Okay.
So at least
That's normal?
And yes, it is normal, unfortunately. Well, Tarrant County is just not politically engaged. We're a non-voting county. You know, Beto always says Texas is a non-voting state. It's not a red state. And the very same thing is true for Tarrant County. And so at least while I was chair, they really had a very similar, the Tarrant County GOP had a very similar precinct chair ratio to us, like almost number for number. I haven't checked their numbers in the last little while, but it's been historically very similar.
Yeah.
And so we just need to get people out to vote. When you keep telling people that your county is only going to go one way, it depresses the vote for all, for all engagement. But the more that we can get people signed up, the more we can get them engaged, the better we are.
Well, it seems like that's the equalizer. What is something, I know you also, I believe, you were like what was it, karate? What was the international, what you do?
So my husband and I are both black belts in Kung Fu. Northern Shaolin Kung Fu. And we competed a lot before we had kids. So I'm technically an international heavyweight champion in the ring. Now I'm just a heavyweight.
So you really could take Tim out. Get Tim out one of these.
We preach nonviolence, but yes.
But the Kung Fu of this, like,
yes.
Where does they have leverage? Like, because I even look at when you and I and our whole organizing across the county around public comments at these events, it just seems like these Republicans have these PACs or these groups like Texas Liberty Project or Patriot Mobile. They get in the ways and in the weeds and actually even make it a lot difficult for their own party. So it's like, what are we lacking some, like, how the financial infrastructure and then also just like the investment? Some of that even seems like it's coming out of the county for them. Like, what do we need that it's not on equal grounds?
In terms of like investment from the PAC side,
Yeah,
you mean? No, you're exactly right. So Patriot Mobile has been a huge influence in local elections, and of course, when local elections are impacted that heavily, it affects things upwards, outwards. If you have Patriot Mobile pouring $11 million into a few local elections in a municipal race, I mean, that is going to make a huge impact locally and in all the other races in the other cycles. And so we need, we have constantly seen an enormous amount of money by the Republicans being poured into Tarrant County. And it would certainly seem that for the last several cycles, since at least about 2018, that they are just very nervous about Tarrant County. So they have seen that the tide is going to turn, and it will, that Democrats will lead this county. And they've been investing heavily in trying to get their extremist message out. And, we're talking about like book bans and dead naming people and all sorts of things. They're really going heavy for those very extremist views. So we need Democratic investment is a short answer. As long as Citizens United is upheld, we need the similar amount of investment on the Democratic side. So we need those national PACs or little state PACs to start investing in Tarrant County Democrats at every level, municipal, local, otherwise. And how
much of your role is to help facilitate that kind of work?
So I definitely tried. As chair the first time. I definitely really tried to coordinate with a lot of national and statewide PACs and campaigns. The number of times I sat with the Beto 2022 campaign, I can't even tell you, trying to get some investment from them. And so we need to get that coordination between the county chair and who's investing in Tarrant County. I mean, the county chair is one of the leading voices for the entire county, speaking on behalf of Democrats and organizing on behalf of Democrats, and certainly should take that leading role in getting investment for Democrats. And so, should it be elected again, we would definitely replay that. We'd start reaching out again to national organizations and statewide PACs and campaigns and try to get that investment flowing to here.
But we also have somebody new in leadership at the state level.
Yes,
so
we do.
Do you
Kendall,
see
yes.
that as being a positive step and someone that we could work with more closely or get more things done?
Definitely. Yes. Great question. So Kendall Scudder is our new TDP chair at the state party. And Gilberto was our chair for 10 or 11 years, something like that. Yeah. And now Kendall is in Rhea recently. And so he and I are actually already friends. So that really works out for me personally. We know each other from, when I ran in 2017. He's been running things. He's been a consultant a long time in DFW for different Democratic campaigns. And so I'm really, he's been around for a while. he's been investing with his time and money and energy and connections into Democrats in Tarrant County. And I think, his recent, the fact that he has so recently been trying to get candidates elected and doing his own organizational work speaks to how well he can run the state party, given all that recent experience. And since he and I already have a friendly relationship, I'm definitely looking forward to working with him closely and trying to get Tarrant County some investment from the state party side. I will tell you, he told me after the Bernie rally, was it a week ago? Was that only a week ago?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Things we do in a week, you guys.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, he told me after the Bernie rally, he was the one that suggested that the tour, the Fighting Oligarchy tour, come to Fort Worth. He was asked by the tour, like, which Texas cities to focus on, and he suggested that they come to Fort Worth, and I'm really grateful for that. And it speaks to his readiness to invest in this county, I think.
What would you think was his motivation to say that? Like, was it the recent Tim O'Hare stuff and the momentum, or is it the importance of Tarrant County as a whole? Like, he just saw the numbers of how important this is.
That's a good question. I'm sure it's multifaceted.
Yeah.
I'm not in his head, so I'm not really sure, but it is definitely multifaceted. And we have a lot of seats here which are flippable, and I think that might be one of the things that other statewide organizers might be saying is,
You have some examples of which seats?
Yes. So not only just our county leadership, which matters enormously, but we have flippable seats here, like in HD 94, which Tinderholt just vacated. Of course, SD 9 is a huge drama right now, which Hallie Hancock just was vacated. And so we have several flippable seats here, which matter at the state level, which will greatly affect, how well our state legislature is run. And so I think, seeing those, and we've had flippable seats here since 2016, we've had flippable seats, and they keep trying to redistrict them away from us, and we keep being like, oh no, it's almost blue again. So of course they're coming for us again with another potential redistricting news for our state and congressional seats, but we'll keep outvoting them.
When you say flippable, like, what's the like number line compared to one that looks flippable to one that's not?
Sure. And I think it depends on the cycle too, because 2022 was a rough cycle. Biden had just been elected. Flippable meant something different than 2020 and 2018. But 2026, flippable to me means anything within 5 points. So, we've seen the special elections around the country. They've been flipping by 10, 17 points. I mean, we've had enormous flips. And of course, not in a special election. You don't expect that much of a shift, but at 5 points, we can do 5 points. Yeah. For sure. So I think anything within that range is definitely within our target.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you also brought up connecting with Beto in 2022. A recent Dallas Morning News article came out where it seems like James Talarico, Julian Castro, Beto, and Colin Allred came together. They're recent. 3 of those 4 went to San Antonio. It seems like there's some type of bench at the state level that can maybe also make a lot of things excited. Like you said, I think Commissioner Simmons and this situation with Tim O'Hare builds a lot of county excitement. What do you see or know or think about, like, preparing for whatever happens at the state kind of positions?
Like for the U.S. Senate races, you mean? Yeah. That is a good question. Can you, like, restate it a little bit?
Yeah, I guess in the sense of what, I mean, someone I'm a big, like, I read a lot of is, like, Michelle Davis with the Lone Star Left.
Definitely,
and she speaks highly of you and your work and what you've did.
Yeah.
But she kind of talked about, like,
those
Texas Democrats, and like Texas Democrats versus DC Democrats, and then also like this constant like, we need moderates to win, and then Kendall Scudder's like, no, we need to be bold progressive. So it's just like that dance is being figured out right now, and I guess I'm just interested in your POV on.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm a big fan, and I know not everybody's going to agree, but I'm a big fan of we need to be out and loud, bold progressives. I definitely agree with Chairman Kendall Scudder right now. And everything, basically every speaker at that Bernie rally, really. I mean, it was not just him that said that. He was the statewide Texas representative, but it was not just him that said that. Everybody had the same message. And truthfully, I struggle to see how centrist Democrats or moderate Democrats are succeeding. Colin Allred did much worse than Beto. In their 2 state Senate races or U.S. Senate races versus Ted Cruz. So same opponent, different cycles. And nothing against Colin Allred. I'm just saying they run campaigns in a very different way, right? So Beto generally tries to have a much more progressive, much more grassroots message, where Colin might run a more centrist or more having the backing of the establishment Democrats, right? And I see everybody's logic on both sides, but for me personally, where I'm seeing the success and where we should put our faith is in that bold progressive message. I mean, anytime we're out and proud about who we are and what we stand for, we do much better. We are giving the people of Tarrant County the realization that somebody's for them. They're not just against other things. They're not just trying to hold their line for their own seats. They're actually for progressives in Tarrant County and for all the rights that we should have that we don't have now. And I think that's the kind of candidate that Democrats want. And I'm interested to see how that primary goes. You know, if we do get 5-6 statewide candidates for that one state or U.S. Senate race, I'm very interested to see, you know, how that shakes out.
Yeah. I hope they find a way to
get over their egos.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And sit and let's be clear, it's all men. I also wish it wasn't all men.
There you go.
But it's
Yes.
That right there might be the very problem.
Double click, clock it. And that's what's that's what's exciting about Tarrant County with like Commissioner Simmons and even Deborah Peoples at our city level.
Yes,
right? It's just like I think we're demonstrating some excitement around not just minority, but also women-led politicians. But it'd be great to see how they figure out. It'd be nice someone gets to the governors, maybe the AGC, and they can build, a thing at the state level. Well, the federal seats, but state backing that then can help bring dollars to and mobilization to you.
So you talked about how one thing you want to do differently this time is build on what you were doing before, but also the Tarrant County Democratic Party has changed quite a bit in those last couple of years.
Sure.
Like staffing issues now. And I remember one of the first big things you did when you became county chair, I was still running Vote Fort Worth at the time, and you put together like this big meeting gathering all the different Democratic organizations in the county to try and like stitch everyone together. And some of those old fogies, they were like, "We've heard this before. We're not falling for it again." I'm like, "You fool! Like, we should all be working together."
Is Wesley saying what you're not going to say?
But also, like, since then, like, it didn't happen then, but it feels like in the past 2 years, it has started to happen. Where like, Cowtown Dems are doing more, young Dems are doing more, and so now you're starting to see the rise in the non-county chair organizations doing the work. Yep. So I'm curious, like, how that affects your mindset on what you want to do at the party now.
So grateful for this question, because that's another thing that's kind of top of mind for me is the coalition of Fort Worth, of Tarrant County. So, making sure that our clubs and allied organizations and the party and the candidates and the volunteers and the election judges and, every interested party, how they all work together cohesively as a unit. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about trying to get my hands into again is that exact thing. So I'm so grateful you remember that big meeting that we had right after I elected. And I want to do that again, and I want to commit better to it than I did last time. We have a lot of committees in the Tarrant County Democratic Party, and of course we have a Clubs and Allied Organizations Committee. And I think I would want to kind of like manhandle a little bit. I've already warned our committee chair, by the way. But I really get my fingers into that pie and like make sure that we have a quarterly meeting for all allied organizations, make sure that we have regular communications with all of our allied organizations and community leaders, and make sure that the party, it's a two-way street, right? We want to make sure that the party is listening and the party is also expressing, what we're seeing or where our organization is, and so that we can all collaborate effectively together. And you're exactly right. Some of these clubs have really flourished in the last 2 or 4 years. I'm so impressed. I mean, I went to Cowtown Dems the other night, and it was just packed. And the fact, if you can pack Angela's, I mean, you're doing great, right? But yeah, the Tarrant County Young Dems are absolutely on fire. I mean, there's plenty of organizations that either just won't quit. I mean, we have tons that have been around for a while: Net Dems, Mid City, Southwest, whatever. And we have a ton that are like still coming up and getting bigger and bigger. And that's true also for the Tarrant County Democratic committees. So when I left office, we didn't have a finance committee, which is kind of now has become like an audit committee. It's tracking the spending, right? And we had a fundraising committee, but it was a baby committee. Like it just formed and there was like 2 people on it. And now, I mean, it's running the show. Like and that's true for many committees at the party level. So like all these things have really flourished, and I'm really grateful for that. Should I get to ascend to chair again, I want to definitely like help those things continue to grow, and I'm so grateful they exist. I mean, how helpful is that to have those volunteers running those kinds of things? That's just amazing. So yeah, I'm really grateful for all the clubs, and I hope we can do better as a party at speaking, at communicating, so we're all on the same page. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to be more specific on that. Are you hoping to rely on those organizations to make up for the staffing shortfalls, or is it a goal to get the staff back?
Good question. So I would have a moderate staff. So last time, I was speaking before about my top-down approach, right? So the most I had 7 staff members when I was chair last time. And I think right now I'd focus on having like 2.5. And by half, I mean somebody who's like a consultant or working on commission if they're helping me fundraise, that kind of thing, with 2 full-time paid staffers, which would be an executive director and a communications director. And so it's kind of a medium answer is my answer to you, which is like we should rely on the amazing work that the allied organizations and the volunteers and committees of the party are already doing. And then we should also give them the support they need by having paid staffers at the party level. So, we're the party of labor, right? So we should pay people to do a lot of the work we're doing. And if you're asking somebody to do 40 hours a week of something, you should pay them. And if you're not, you should only expect, 2 hours a week or less, whatever that volunteer can commit, And so it's a very medium answer is my answer. Like I want to work well with the amazing strategies and organizations that these clubs have already provided. And then I also want to provide support from the county party level too.
Yeah. Really? Well, I think I was the last 5 years just about Fort Worth, and this pod is just about Fort Worth, and this whole Judge Tim O'Hare stuff and racial gerrymandering made me county focused, and then I started organizing and seeing county stuff, and I think, in my gut, I always like, man, should the Tarrant, obviously we don't have that option, but like the power of having a Fort Worth rep being the chair, like because it feels like one of my fears has always been, it's just like now watching it is how much of our influencers come from Euless, come from Keller, come from Colleyville, come from around Fort Worth. And so I guess I'm wondering, how do you, as being the quilt, right, you're helping putting all the squares together. When you look at stuff like United Fort Worth, Tarrant for Change, the 817 Gather, how do you see people who are like, we're not a part of those parties, but obviously we're trying to move people to get active. How do you see the non-democratic organizations tied under, fit in the quilt to help with a lot of the city stuff, like Sunrise Tarrant, which houses in Arlington, right? There's all these like pocket grassroots organizers that also need to kind of see themselves a part of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and great point about outside influence. There's not outside, literally outside, but like in the outer circle of the county. How many enormous PACs have funded Tim O'Hare from Colleyville? Like, it's just crazy. Or our Fort Worth City Council.
There was some definite movement trying to influence the Fort Worth City Council from those outlying areas.
Like, it's just amazing.
And I think that's what prompted me to get more vocal in my support of the candidates at the local level, because I was like, I am not having this.
No.
And it's, and what I see, and it's the power of just seeing like what happened at Keller and how those school boards got flipped, but then also to see there was twice as many people in those rooms than even a city hall meeting in Fort Worth. That's like the activism that's happening. But it's, I feel like there's a lot of apathy still in Fort Worth that, 1% increase in voter turnout in Fort Worth is 4,000 votes. And so I just feel like that's I'm glad that you're here with us, but I feel like we do feel like a lot of our responsibility is to help elevate that part with what you're having going on with the net of the county.
Definitely. Yeah. And to your point about the other organizations, like what they do is so important and so critical. If we're talking about like United Fort Worth or Livable Arlington or anybody else, like, the work they're doing is so important, and most of it is nonpartisan. I mean, they will talk about anybody, they'll support or not support anybody. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. And that's honestly what we need to keep us honest. If we want our party to be better, we need to hold it accountable. And organizations like United Fort Worth are holding every party accountable. And I'm so grateful for that. We do have an issue with, it kind of goes both ways. So we have an issue with a lot of influence coming from outside Fort Worth, affecting Fort Worth. And then we also have an issue with people feeling like the party and I think countywide initiatives only focusing on Fort Worth. It goes both ways. It's really interesting. I got a lot of guff when I was first time that the party just doesn't do anything in Arlington or doesn't do anything in Benbrook or whatever. I mean, we have areas where people, things are important and we're just not holding enough events there. We're not focusing enough organizing there, whatever. And it really just is a two-way street in terms of like how people are perceiving it. But I think also a greater question or answer to your point is DFW in Fort Worth. I mean, it's becoming kind of a megatropolis, right? Like just because your city councilor is in Keller doesn't mean you don't care what's going on in Arlington. It affects you, like whether you work there, or somebody there, or the people who are elected there affect your just day-to-day livable, choices. I think that's why we're starting to see, people like Commissioner Simmons are going to Keller ISD meetings for a reason, because it matters for our whole county, no matter what city you live in. And so the more that we kind of organize as a county, obviously Fort Worth being the biggest part of that, the more we organize as a county, I think the better we all are as a community, no matter where you live.
And I think for the issues of transportation and connectivity and transit and getting around the region, that's what's so important about all of that.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you kind of brought up the Elisa Simmons part, because I think she set the tone how we can't just focus on the issues that are personal to us. Sometimes I hear people say, this one's personal to me. But it's like, okay. And and it could be someone who is in the Black community, or it could be someone in the Hispanic community or the Pride community. But we got to care, or from Keller, and I'm a mom, but it's like, but are you going to go into the Black community to advocate for them? Are you going to go into the Latin community and stand up for them? And it takes all of us to not just show up to City Hall when it's our thing that's personal to us.
I totally agree.
And that's what I think was so powerful about Elisa Simmons. And if we can hone that leadership, all of us, and model that, I think what you're trying to do is going to be able to be possible.
Awesome. We can only hope. And, that's when I see things like, 817's doing things like advocating for the issue around the FedEx trucks, right? You're like, this sounds like such a niche issue, but you're right. Like, we need to show up for each other. We need to show up for our communities, because we are a community together here in Tarrant County.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, super excited to have you on the pod.
Thank you.
We look forward to you as you continue to move, and we're always here to collaborate. Until next time.
Yep. See you next time. Thank you, guys.
So now we'll enter into our discussion about our short stories, leading off with our first short story, which is the Fort Worth City Council's debate on DEI programs and the delayed vote that they had after their last meeting before their July break. So there was a 6-hour city council meeting because a lot of folks signed up to speak. It was Mia Hall, District 6's first council meeting, which I commiserated with her about, because my first meeting was quite lengthy as well, although hers was during the day and mine went into the wee hours of the morning. But we had a lot of great speakers from the 817 gather. And
did you stay for the whole meeting?
I did. I stayed, well, not the whole meeting, but I stayed through the zoning because there was another item.
I feel like we have to. I feel like we have to do context for the guests and kind of what happened and how it went on the vote.
Yeah.
So this was the June 24th City Council. It's important to note that this kind of the agenda item was very ambiguous, and it was relatively rushed. It sounds like they started based off of Mia Hall's question. It sounds like they got a notice about this in around May. And so the acceleration here is leading to this story is about the federal government is trying to hold potentially $277 million from Fort Worth City due to unless we remove our DEI programs and suspend those programs that are focused on race, gender, ethnicity. And so in that vote, I think 95% of the people and 95% of the odds would have showed you that they were going to pass it. And what happened is that they made a continuation to August 5th. And so that continuation happened because a couple of the city council members that stood up and said, hey, we kind of have some different values. We want certain things to consider. We had a couple important speakers. I say Contrita Carpenter speaking, a friend of the pod, her sharing her small business was big. And then it led into a 9-2 where the mayor finally saw that she could not maybe have the votes. She took a proactive step on saying, well, let's do a continuation. And 9 of the council members went with that. The ones who did not was Macy Hill at District 7 and Charlie Lauersdorf in District 4. And so Wesley and myself all shared comments, and some other people who listened to the pod. What are your guys' take? Being there and speaking, and both of you guys did an incredible job.
Well, I think they had a really long discussion on the dais, which is not always something that we see in most recent times.
I really liked it.
Yeah, I liked it too. I think that it does sometimes make for some uncomfortability amongst them, but I think that's fine. That's what they're there to do.
Exactly.
So I think that there was, that was something that I was surprised to see, because I thought, to your point about the resolution itself, not being totally clear as to what was going to occur from it. There was articles that indicated that no staff were going to lose their positions, but that they would have to suspend, current programs. And to your point about the timeline too, that was very much in flux during the discussion at the council meeting as well, because Mia Hall, being a new council member, was asking questions about when staff was first aware that this was going to be something they were going to need to deal with, and why there was not a robust plan for the programming that many of them seemed to be wanting to assure everyone would continue even in the face of eliminating some of these things.
I really like that she did that in the meeting, because like those are questions she could have asked beforehand, but like saying that into the record for the public to hear about how not proactive any city staff was about this issue and how short the timeline to react was.
Yeah, the executive order came out, I think, in February, and then now here we are at the end of June. And so clearly...
They said January.
They said end of May was the first time that city staff had ever even thought about how to react to it.
Departments started coming to the city manager's office indicating that some of these things were going to impact their funding.
Yeah. And one thing that I hadn't heard before that I was surprised to learn in that meeting was that part of why city staff was so concerned about this is that they have to check a box on the grant form that says whether or not they comply with federal law. And so if they know that we have DEI initiatives and the executive order says that we don't, and they say, no, we don't, then they are criminally and civilly liable personally, themselves as a city employee.
Individual staff members.
That's wild.
Yeah. And I think that's what was giving some of the council members great pause, because they don't want to put the staff in that role or in that position, because that's not a great position for them to be in.
Exactly.
Well, I think that I feel like I'm got to zoom out as well to see why this vote is so important. I think if you're listening to this episode and you're like, DEI, $270 million, seems like we got to bite the bullet. But I think when you zoom out all the way back to 2023, when it started with the reading badge, for the LGBTQ reading badge, we removed that in 2023. In October of 2023, Nazis showed up to our neighborhood, and we had that concern. And then you had the Texas Liberty Project having that conference at the Botanical Gardens. The Botanical Gardens said no to that because we believe in everyone and we're not going to allow hate at our gardens. But City Council, the city said you have to allow them to use it. And then you're kind of going to the proclamation of 2024 getting removed, and proclamations as a whole being removed. And then it leads into Mercy Culture in the late 2024 in December. And then in 2025, you had the racial gerrymandering silence and the lack of power taken from Black and brown people of Fort Worth to have a true vote in countywide elections. And so I think what this really is embodying is that inch by inch, we have been given into extremism that is trying to control the county. And even our guest, Allison Campolo, talk about the Republicans using that strategy to keep control of our county. And our mayor has relatively been silent and allowing and enabling this. We go have an article back in 2022 of her talking in Texas Tribune how she would not run in a Republican primary because she couldn't look herself in the mirror. I think it's only gotten crazier since that Texas Tribune article. But instead, another extremist point she made was do a bat signal to Brooke Rollins, who started the American First Policy Institute, and quote says this is the Trump White House think tank to wait until he's in office again. And I just think this is what this is really about is where and when are we going to stop extremism? It wasn't Tim O'Hare. It wasn't this racial gerrymandering. Now Trump's here. And I think why this is so important is now it's also the decision between the 6 Democrats on council. So it's not just extremism's creeping in, but power is shifting. And why this vote on August 5th is so important is what is Fort Worth going to be able to do on its values? Do we really value diversity? If this was police, I think this would have been an easy vote to stand up against. Or do we really value diversity? And what are we going to willing to risk for that? And it's truly a vote on Are we holding up the Fort Worth way? Or are we saying now power has changed in Fort Worth? Now, I'm not saying they're going to get there this time. I think there is going to be a break in the group. But what we're going to see over the next 2 years is eventually they're going to say enough is enough. And that is what we got to decide when that happens.
Yeah, that was one thing I liked that Mendy Tackett spoke about like, you can't satiate a bully. They'll always ask for more.
Yep.
And several other speakers made that point, and I was very glad that Deborah Peoples echoed that from the dais about how, like, you're just, you give them an inch, they're going to ask for a mile. Like, it just keeps going, and so you have to stand up to a bully and say no more. And you're right. Like, it's so sad that, like, we're just at the beginning of the Trump presidency, and like there's going to be so many more battles, and we need to like make a line in the sand.
And I think to the point that sometimes people fall back on of that they want our council to be cordial to each other and get along with each other and not be like the city to the east where people argue and throw each other under the bus and all that. I don't think that's what happened in this meeting. I think they were all cordial and but we had discussions that were hard conversations that are necessary.
Yes.
And so I don't want anyone to try to say that we can't have those kind of conversations and point to the east and say, oh, we don't want to be like that and we're getting more like that, to try to quell this type of honest debate on the dais, because I think that honest debate needs to be happening in public on the dais for everybody to see. Otherwise, we have no idea where they stand.
Exactly.
And speaking of having no idea where they stand, there were a couple people who said nothing through this entire thing and then voted. And so their vote said a lot.
Yep.
Clearly identified where they were.
My council person, Macy Hill, not a single word the whole time. Alan Blaylock, not a single word.
And this is going back to the extremism piece. Yeah. Extremism, in my opinion, is on the dais.
Yeah.
It is on the dais.
Real quick, I wanted to say, like, I was surprised that Charlie Lauersdorf actually spoke up in that meeting. He was the only ones, like, loudly against DEI initiatives, and I thought it was so ridiculous that he was like, look at this dais, we're diverse, look at the city staff right here, there's no old white men here, like, why do we need DEI? And I'm like, you absolute fool, like, we got here because there was a thoughtful, purposeful effort to make it more inclusive and make it possible to not just have a uniform city.
We only got 3 minutes when we speak at public comments, but I wish I could spend it 3 minutes on Charlie Lauersdorf, because to me, that was a showmanship, because I think what him and Alan Blaylock are starting to see is that wherever they're trying to go, you aren't going to be able to do it in the city. I think Macy Hill might see that too, because there's clearly seeing that we're becoming a city where we light up the city hall with the pride colors, and whatever they believe in value will no longer work in the city. And I think Charlie Lauersdorf was trying to showcase, hey, help me out here and let me find me a House Senate seat or advisory seat to something. Because in April, Charlie Lauersdorf invited Nate Scatzline to speak at his campaign and his fundraiser to get elected. Who also spoke? Alan Blaylock. Who also spoke? Michael Crane. Nate Scatzline is an elder at Mercy Culture. Nate Scatzline is the one who brought the bill to Texas to arrest independent bookstores for having anti-racism or LGBTQ books in their bookstores. That Half Price Books campaign that the Half Price Books stood up to, that was against Nate Scatzline. And so the same guy who said all that, he's like, oh, what's the worst that can happen? Well, yeah, there's no 80 white people running the city, but those are the people who are in your rooms, Charlie, that you're sitting here on this dais for. And, you know, that's, to me, we got to call out that the Republican Party is leading to the extremism. Carlos Flores, who was sitting right next to Crane and Charlie Lauersdorf, he said this is about people, not politics. And I think he was talking to the people making it drama about fighting for DEI, and he's saying we were making it political, when I would argue it's the Republican candidates who are making political, because DEI has been something the Fort Worth people has always stood up for. Betsy Price stood up for DEI, and also, like, Fort Worth doesn't bow down to dictators. Our entire city was built off of saying no to federal pushover. You know, we had Hell Half Acre, all that stuff is because we stand up to dictators and bullies. And so, like, him saying that this is turning into political, it's because their side, inch by inch, has allowed their party and now are trying to allow our city to say DEI is political. And I hope Carlos Flores realizes that, but I'm not sure where he'll land.
Yeah, I think these are about policies for people.
Yeah.
And to be saying that we're making it political, I think is gaslighting, because we wouldn't even have to stand up and say these are the best policies if these people weren't pushing their politics that obviously is partisan politics to all those things that we've been fighting for 30 years.
And what I was so disappointed on Mayor Parker, where I'm like, oh, whoever I thought you really ever could be, it's gone. And because we were coming in with a lot of empathy, a lot of concern about diversity. I don't think we directly attacked Mayor Parker. I think we were saying we, us. I mean, Pamela did the recording thing, which was amazing.
Yeah, Pam Young from United Fort Worth, when she had her 3 minutes up at the mic, she spent half of it just replaying Maddie Parker's words at the Pride Proclamation, saying, "This is an inclusive city for all." It's like, okay, you said this, now back it up.
Yeah, and what you can just see in the mayor's eyes, her fangs came out. She didn't try to say, "I get it, guys, we're just in a hard place." Like, not even like, "Hey, guys, I get it. We're just in a hard place." It was, no, let me throw the lawyer out and tell you guys how we're in trouble. It was trying to pressure. It was trying to say, oh, we're already $20 million in the hole. Like, it was such a bullying and trying to be threatful. The way she looked at Mia Hall when Mia Hall stepped up, like, she had that person we saw at the Pride resolution is completely not a real person. When you watch that City Hall and how she behaved that day.
Yeah, it's words, not actions.
Yeah, and her actions that day was aggressive. And I think this is where Elizabeth Beck is really important as the lawyer on the council. It's like, this whole threats on law, it's like, this is why you hire lawyers. And Betsy Price.
Yeah, I mean, when we were on council, there was a very much a position of trying to avoid getting sued. There were council members who were constantly saying, or staff was constantly saying, well, we could get sued if we did this. We could get sued if we did this. And at one point, I remember Betsy Price saying, that's why we have lawyers. If this is the right thing to do, then we need to go forward with doing it. And then if we have to fight with lawyers, then that's what the lawyers are here to do.
Yes.
And that's where you see, and I'm not saying that that's happening at the city level, but I work in education, and this is what we see, and we do a lot of innovative stuff to try to help engage students with school. And all the time, there's superintendents and school boards where their number one priority is saving their own ass and protecting the district from getting sued.
Yeah.
But then what happens is you create a system that's actually not for kids. Mm-hmm. You actually create models that doesn't allow kids to do things.
Yeah.
A great example is you have to acquire parent consent forms for every kid to see a social worker. Well, a lot of kids who can't get a parent consent form signed
need to see a social worker.
It's because it's like you're creating inequities by asking for the parent consent form for every kid. So it's like our city is starting to behave that way of like, I am more about protecting my job and my institution, but a part of your role, especially in the times that we're in now, it's like we can't rely on the Supreme Court to do the right thing. We can't rely on the Senate to do the right thing. Like, we are in the fights. And so, yes, does that mean that we're talking about a 10% budget decrease? Like, if you talk to black and brown people, 10% of anything is just like a good day. And we're over here worked up about it. Like, that's just my whole take about, like, eventually we got to be bold and we got to deal like, yeah, we're going to have to take something on the chin right now, but it's off of values and what we want to be and how we want to stand up eventually.
Yeah, it's weird to me that they act like getting sued is the worst thing that could happen, when to me, like, sacrificing your morals is the worst thing that could happen. Like, if you're actively
the county doesn't
creating...
seem to be worried about getting sued. They're standing on their morals and doing things that are getting them sued.
And that's a good call. I mean, that's something that didn't make the short story list, but July 1st, tomorrow, you know, if you're listening on Monday, there's a vote
on
for
Tuesday.
Yep, to give 6 figures to PILF to fight the lawsuit using tax dollars. And we told them that they're going to get sued. Now we got sued, and now Tarrant County's people's tax dollars are being asked to spend on the same lawyers. We talked about this last episode if you didn't see it, but it's moved to July 1st, which is Tuesday. So all in all, this is going to be a conversation that we'll continue to have, as now the vote is August 5th. So just be on the lookout as the conversation continues to change. But I know some of the stories we're also talking about is showcasing how there's flusters and impacts in the Republican Party because of all this.
So short story 2 is Republican leaders condemn Tarrant County GOP chair bigotry against Jews, Muslim people, which we all found to be quite interesting because the chair of the Tarrant County GOP has been saying some really awful things on social media for years.
Yes.
And
Beau French has just the worst Twitter history, just heinous thing after heinous thing.
Yeah, it's very bad. And finally, not even someone here locally called him out. Dan Patrick stepped in.
He had a tweet that said something like, "Who's more of a danger to our country?" And it was a poll, Jews or Muslims, which is an insane thing to tweet. And that's what did it, apparently.
So Dan Patrick tweeted that Beau French's survey asking that question was offensive and that he should be immediately removed from his role of leading the GOP party here in Tarrant County.
And to give you perspective on who we're talking about, this would be like who we just interviewed tweeted that. Like, I'm just trying to give you what Allison Campolo is trying to be for the Democratic Party. That's who this person is.
For the Republican
Party.
Yeah.
Wild.
And then immediately after Dan Patrick did this, local representatives here on the Republican side started retweeting his message and agreeing with him and saying that this is a problem, but not referring to the past and the things that he's already said that were serious problems.
Just years of awful things. No comment. And then also one thing I noticed is that a lot of the response of how they were like, "Oh, he's gone too far. He said the wrong thing." It's more they were mad about the anti-Semitism and not the Islamophobia. Like Craig Goldman's like, "As a 6th-generation American Jew, I'm offended." I'm like, but the other thing, you don't want to comment on that too?
Yeah, and that's the, again, example of comfort over courage. Performative courage is, our mayor was one of those people who said, yeah, Beau is bad, and a little late. A little late. Like, how about when he said, when a bunch of us, thousands of people went to a No Kings rally, thousands of people to stand up against dictators, he said it takes just a few snipers to end this really quickly.
He also indicated that we were going to be rioting and that there was probably going to be pallets of bricks at this event. And
the mayor of the city doesn't stand up to that. The mayor of the city doesn't say enough is enough. And that's why I'm tired of this. Like, this whole, there's just so many levels. The ICE stuff that's raiding across Latino communities. And like, we're having a run club freaking raise money and advocate for protection of ICE and raised over $3,800 where people worried about ICE lawsuits and stuff like that. Like, that's like what Mas Milas, this run club, is doing. Like, this last week, it's just like, why are community members having to do the hard work, not our city officials, and stand up when we need to be courage? There's too much silence. And I don't want anyone to give them credit for this Beau French stuff.
Could have done this a lot sooner. It's just sad that they like waited for the cover of a bigger fish and then they dogpiled on. It's like,
it's the same with the racial gerrymandering, right? It took the mayor from Arlington. All right, it's just like comfort is constantly being selected, and eventually we got to hold them accountable.
He says he's not resigning, so there's that too. All these people have piled on, and I think he's still saying he's not resigning. So our final question is, will this be enough to finally get rid of him? But he doesn't seem to be wanting to leave. I guess it's up to the precinct chairs on that side of things.
We are going to move into short story number 3. Short story number 3 is just kind of playing at a bigger level of this, talking about state politics. I think we're wanting to make this show around the importance of county politics and state politics. I know we're focused on the city and all that goes on here, but Chris Tackett and Mindy Tackett, a part of See It, Name It, Fight It, do an annual scorecard. This is their second time doing it, so I don't want to actually put them pressure that they do it every year, but because it takes a lot of time. But basically what they do is they rank the House reps at the state level and rate how they do voting against Christian nationalism. And so on their blog, they spent a lot of work. We're going to link it into the show notes, but they basically identified 12 Christian nationalism influenced bills at the Texas Ledge. SB 2, which was the vouchers. SB 3, banning THC in Texas. SB 10, 10 Commandments in public schools. SB 11, period of prayer and Bible reading in public schools. wild. SB 12, parental rights, anti-DEI, and anti-LGBTQ. SB 13, public schools libraries having a advisory council for selecting books. SB 17, banning certain foreign aliens and entities from purchasing property. SB 24, Red Scare, taught in grades 4 through 12. SB 33, banning a government entity from providing any sort of assistance for someone seeking an abortion. SB 37, create governing boards for higher learning institutions to allow the board to overturn hiring decisions on DEI. HB 229, limits gender for government records to just male or female. HB 4535, anti-vaccine, requires fear-based rhetoric when providing the vaccine. So these are all the ones they listed as influenced by Christian nationalists in Texas. And so then they went through all 150, graded them from A through F. A, you voted against those 12. F, you voted pretty much for all of them. And I'm just going to give you the total so we can get some of your guys' insight of what you're hearing here. And I know we've had a long show. Is 46 Democrats got an A, and 11 of them got a gold star, meaning they voted. The 11 Democrats voted 10 of those 12, voted 10 against, and then 7 got a B, 2 got a C, 3 got a D, and 4 got an F. All the Republicans got an F. So 88 of the Republicans. So the moral of this story that I want to just share here, why this was a part of this conversation, is that this whole idea of moderate Republicans is over. All 88 got an F. That means the 12 bills I shared you, 88, all of them, voted for all these. Prayer in school, anti-abort, all of it. So there's this idea that there's these moderate Republicans is no more. And so this idea that these moderate Republicans we were just talking about in Short Story 2 are going to do anything, they're no longer there. And the other scary part here is when you look at the DNFs, that means 11% of the Democrats got a DNF. And what that is showing you is that trying to collaborate with extremism doesn't work. And you end up falling in line, thinking they're going to vote for something for you if you give them something and you don't. And so that's why I thought this article was so important, is because it shows how the moderate game, I just don't know if it works. And this idea of collaborating with people who are not here to collaborate, but instead push an agenda like Tim O'Hare, it has to start being, yes, about politics as well, Carlos Flores. So what are your guys' take?
Like the call out there.
You said all of the things. I was looking at the ratings on the Tackett's website or post about it, and the thing that resonated with me is just how complicated it is to keep up with all these bills. Mm-hmm. And so it's nice to have somebody who is focused on that particular topic to make sure that they can inform us and let us know. But it's already done. These bills are passed, and they are passed. That the governor has gotten past his time of when he could veto anything, and they're all going into effect on September 1st. And half of our state, more than half of our state, has no idea.
And by the way, I was talking to a school board member at a school in Tarrant County, and they were talking about having to put these 10 commandments in schools, and should they and do they want to? And they're having a school board vote. Do we sue? Do we stand up? And so this whole idea that we're doing this at DEI isn't, others are discussing this and seeing where their true colors lie as well on what they stand up to.
Well, and wasn't there something also that allows parents to say that they don't want their kids to be exposed to certain things? And they were thinking that that was going to enable them to make sure that they could have their kids not be exposed to like books or whatever. And now they're going to, I mean, we could, if we wanted to, my kids are grown, but people with young kids now could say, I don't want my child exposed to those 10 commandments because it's not our religion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so they should all go down there and start putting in their protests for having their kids be exposed to stuff that is in opposition to what their beliefs are.
Yeah. And that's where I go back to this whole City Hall thing and our DEI stuff is like Carlos Flores, who is really the most powerful person on that council right now.
As the one swing vote,
is he's trying to act like politics that doesn't exist. And while everyone around him who's against people who look like him, who have names like him, are using power in politics. So it's like, we Democrats have to stop thinking that we can't use our power. And that's why these 6 of the 11 have to start standing up, because you got to start fighting fire. You got to start fighting fire with fire. I know Carlos Flores is an engineer. Well, a negative and a negative equals a positive. So go. Let's do it. That was a good one, guys. That was a good. Sometimes that was a good.
So we always end our pod with wins, losses, and actions. And we have been doing some kind of collaborative wins and not each individually doing a win. So I think that we have landed on a couple of collaborative wins for this week. The first one being that we heard rumor to the fact that City Hall might be lit up in rainbow colors last night. And I mentioned it to a couple other people because I didn't want it to be like lit up for 10 minutes and then go away and have us all miss it if that was indeed going to happen. And I had suggested to a couple people who are great photographers that they go over and try to get some pictures. Last night when I was leaving the Pride Fest, I caught a glimpse of, well, I was turning on Lancaster and I saw that the Lancaster sculptures were lit in rainbow. And then I saw out of the corner of my eye that City Hall was. So instead of going straight home, I went over there and took some pictures. And then later in the evening, noticed that some other folks had done the same. But unfortunately, we didn't have a big announcement on all of the elected officials' websites or Facebook pages telling us that this was happening. But there was a Fort Worth Report article, and it was beautiful, and I was very glad to see that happen.
It was nice to see. It was a good way to end Trinity Pride, which was a huge success.
Yeah, kudos Trinity Pride team.
Yeah, I'm wearing the Trinity Pride shirt from Morgan Mercantile.
And I'm wearing my Trinity Pride shirt from last year.
I hope they still got swag. The line was so long, so I just didn't.
It was.
I was like, I only was going to be able to be there for an hour because we had other things. So,
well, it sounds like they're happy to print more, but like I was just blown away by the whole thing. Like, it's wild to me that they started this year with like almost no money. Like, some of their bigger sponsors pulled out because of Trump nonsense, and you know, the fact that they lost their space and had to rethink the entire festival on South Main. I was just blown away. Like, so many events. It was packed.
And it was happy.
And that was a scaled back event
exactly,
too.
yes.
They didn't even move forward with all the events that they originally planned. And maybe next year it'll be even bigger and better because they can have a year lead up time and it's not in a new space and lessons learned about how things went. And it was fabulous. That team did a great job.
Yep.
And there were so many great sponsors that were there. Mm-hmm. You know, smaller sponsors, maybe not so much corporate sponsors, but just individual. And the representation from various churches in Fort Worth was incredible. And I'm really proud and happy to be friends with many of the people that go to those churches. The Quakers were there.
Nice.
There you go.
It was fantastic.
It was fun doing the puppets. And then, at Amphibian Stage, we sold out of the show 3 times. Like, we just kept adding more seats. Like, it was packed.
Yeah,
I loved it.
It was great. Great community gathering.
And I guess we should have started by saying this weekend, Saturday, was the Trinity Pride Fest, because I know we jump into all of the nuances because we assume everyone knows that. But there you go.
Into so many people we knew while we were there. We figured that all of Fort Worth was there.
Well, and also one thing I added to our list of wins is Zohran Mamdani won the Democratic primary for New York City mayor. Like, seeing such a bold, progressive, like, grassroots organizer win an election that big with that much momentum, I feel like it shifts the tone of what can be done, like, across the country. So.
Yeah,
he did an interview on the subway, so I think he's fantastic.
And as for losses, we do have, sadly, quite a few. So one of them, the news of this actually broke, of the Cooper fire, while we were recording last week's episode. And we had a quick debate on whether we should talk about it, but we were waiting for news to come in. At the time, we didn't know it was going to be a 6-alarm fire. And it's wild. And I later realized I have at least 3 friends who were affected by it. One of them was a puppeteer that was helping with Trinity Pride yesterday. And it's been really nice to see the community rally around supporting these people. Like Elizabeth Beck and United Way and Near Southside have put together a relief fund to help those who were affected. And, like, you know, one of them was a Fort Worth Report journalist who he lost everything, and his wedding's in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So rough times.
Yeah, I saw several people that I knew personally as well, and some individual fundraising going on, and was glad to see the coordinated effort that Councilwoman Beck's office put together with United Way. Every dollar goes to the residents. It's dollar for dollar. They're not taking any fees to run that through United Way. So if you want to help out your fellow man and woman here in Fort Worth, you can do so by supporting that effort.
Yeah, another loss is that when the same city council meeting where we had the DEI vote, the Echo Heights neighborhood was trying to stop a FedEx parking lot from getting a permit that allows them to pollute the hell out of that neighborhood. And we heard a lot from the neighborhood speaking out about the negative impacts, because apparently FedEx has illegally been doing this for the past 5 years. Like, it's not zoned for them to be doing this. And
I think there was a switch in the type of permit that was required, and so I think there was fault on both sides, city and the applicant, not knowing that their permit had lapsed and a new process was in place. But yeah.
Which is kind of funny because it was like right down the street from the code compliance office.
Yes, I heard that as well.
But yeah, the vote passed for the zoning change. They ignored the neighborhood, and FedEx gets to keep idling their trucks right next to where children are playing in the street. So that was disappointing. But for me, the biggest loss is the community arts center. So anyone who knows me knows I am passionate about getting that building back to how it should be. Hidden in the consent agenda at that same city council meeting was a contract for Arts Fort Worth to now be housed out of what will be the downtown library, just until they're ready to start construction on it. So could be 6 months, could be 18 months. We don't really know. So it's nice that they have a home. So that was Tuesday. Wednesday morning, I took a tour of the Community Arts Center to document it as they're moving out. And I didn't realize that Thursday they were completely out of there. So now there is no longer anything happening in the Community Arts Center. And there's still nothing happening from the city to restart the redevelopment process. No attempt to reach out to the community to figure out, what do y'all need for how to redevelop this? There's nothing. And like this past year, we have felt, the arts community has strongly felt the effects of not having this vital resource. It is the only mid-sized building for art shows like this. Like almost every theater in town was incubated in the Black Box at the Community Arts Center. The Scott Theater hosted shows that just can't really exist anywhere else. And the scale of the galleries is just unmatched in Fort Worth. So there are so many shows that were planned to be there or like built for that space, just don't have a home. And so like we're already seeing an atrophy of the arts community. Like there are people in the community passionate about trying to make up the gap, but a building of that size with such a communal purpose, there's nothing that meets that. And one thing that's been crazy to me is in the past 3 to 5 years, you've seen Arlington, of all places, heavily invest in funding and supporting art there. And so now I'm starting to see them hoping to like bring some of what Fort Worth is losing to Arlington. And I'm like, are we really going to let that happen? We already lose enough artists to Dallas. Like, do we really want brain drain to Dallas and Arlington when we have so much talent here and like so much community and opportunity, but the city just hasn't been prioritizing what makes a city worth living in? So that's a huge loss for me. I could talk about that all day.
Yeah, I think that was the very first task force I served on after rotating off of council. And it was a really frustrating situation. It highlights the city has let old buildings that they own that could be treasured gems of our community deteriorate to a point where the amount of money it takes to rehab them and keep them going is significant. But it is because of a lack of funding for the arts coming from the city. And so I think that with people like you who have started organizations to support Fort Worth art, continuing to, bang that drum and make sure that stays front and center, that's what it takes in order for things to not fall off of the radar of the folks that are making those policy decisions. So a loss that we could make into a win if we continue to do the work that we do here.
Yep, gotta advocate. And if you're interested in getting involved with the fight to get the Community Arts Center back, look up Support Fort Worth Art on Instagram, Facebook, got a website. I'm happy to help,
I almost wore that shirt today.
I'm glad you wore the Protect Trans People shirt.
So we always like to end our podcast with actions because people are constantly coming to us and asking, what can we do about the things that you all bring to our attention on the podcast every week? And so this week, there are a couple of actions that you can take. We mentioned before that the Commissioner's Court will be having an item on their agenda this week on July 1st, which is the day that you are, or the day after you are listening to this podcast, where they will be hiring a firm. And in my understanding is the firm that they have teed up to hire is the firm that got us in this situation in the first place. But that's an item on their agenda on Tuesday this week.
Yeah, to hire the firm to defend the racist gerrymandered maps that they passed.
Yes.
Yep.
The people who made the racist gerrymandering maps are going to be hired to defend those maps. And I don't know that they went through a process to request proposals for this, which this is a $250,000 item. The $30,000 that was passed could be done by the judge on his own unilaterally without having to go through a process. But I'm not sure how they got this $250,000 item on the agenda without going through a more robust process. Not to mention, I think it's a bit of a conflict of interest for this law firm to be doing this too. So somebody should look into that as well. Another item that I just think we need to get on the radar, although I don't have anything concrete to point you to in order to start speaking up about this, is that the city of Fort Worth is about to go into their bond and budget process where there will be public meetings, hopefully, and some online surveys in various ways to give your input as to where you think the city's budget should go and what you think should end up on the bond in 2026. So those are some things that are upcoming that we don't have direct contact on the city's website yet, but hopefully that will be available soon and we'll continue to keep you up to date on that.
Yeah, if you follow the 817 podcast on social media, we'll be posting links to those.
Yep. And then the final one that I just added as we were talking to our guest today is find out if you have a precinct chair. Because there obviously are some gaps there. And if there is not a precinct chair in your precinct, you should definitely step up and volunteer to be one, as Wesley has done. Or you should find somebody in your neighborhood who is willing to do that work.
Well, and also something they've added recently is if there is already a precinct chair in your neighborhood, there's a new position, I forget the name of it, but where you have all of the access to tools and information as the precinct chair. You just don't get to vote in county party election stuff like a precinct chair does. So it's a great way to like build up more power in communities.
Yeah, and I think all precinct chairs would appreciate the support in the neighborhood because if they're going door to door, which mine has done in years past, you know, depending on how big your precinct is, that's a lot of doors.
Absolutely.
Yep. Well, there you have it. We have another great episode of the 817 podcast. If you felt like you learned something today and there's someone in your life who lives in the area who should also hear this information, please go share the episode and also have them subscribe. We'll see you next time on the 817 podcast.